So thank you tonight for coming out to another wonderful meeting of the FSU chapter of the International Association of Emergency Managers. We're so lucky to have tonight Shannon Riess-DeSalvo as our speaker. I will give a little bit of a brief intro to her bio. She holds a Bachelor of Science in International Affairs and Interdisciplinary Social Science from Florida State University, as well as a Master's of Science in Risk Management and Insurance, also from Florida State University. She has worked with the Florida Division of Emergency Management, helping out with floodplain management. And she also currently works as an emergency management specialist with FEMA, assisting with their housing efforts. And so that's a little bit of a touch on her bio. I'm sure there's plenty more to add about that, about the wonderful career journey she's been through and the position she's helped out in, and things like, flood insurance and floodplain management and all that sort of interesting stuff. And so thank you once again, Shannon, for being our speaker tonight. And I now pass the floor over to you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thanks, guys. Thanks for thinking I'm cool enough to have me. So I will try to see if I can share my screen. I don't think I'm doing it in PowerPoint mode. There we go. Now I can do the play thingy. Okay, and I still see you guys. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about myself and why I'm cool and interesting and was invited here. I started out just like you guys really not too long ago. I was an undergraduate at FSU. I was in this club. I helped organize some of these speaker series back in the day. So it's really awesome that I get to talk to you guys today. So knowing a little bit about me, you obviously know I did undergrad there. I won't talk too much about that. The one thing that I will say is that my internships really helped me land my position. So I did an internship with the Continuity of Operations team, COOP, in the spring of my my senior year, and then that led to me getting the emergency management intern with the Smithsonian. Hi, my cat is being really difficult. And I was the first summer intern that they ever had. Actually, I think it was the first emergency management intern that they ever had. So that was really an exciting thing, and I really helped pave the way for that. And I know that some of you have done that since. One of the questions I get the most when I talk about floodplain management, nobody actually knows what that means. Would you stop that? So nobody really knows what floodplain management is. There's three parts to the NFIP. Mapping, that's how you get flood maps, insurance, obviously, but the third part is a little bit lesser known. It's regulations. So floodplain management is really how do we manage development and to be all in a compliant yet educational time frame. So that's kind of really hard to do, especially when you have a lot of people calling in an audit, because we do go into their community. It has a lot of field work, which was awesome. We take pictures of new construction and some existing construction and pull permits. So it was very heavy with regulatory. And honestly, I didn't know anything about that when I went and got the job. What got me the job was my internship at the Smithsonian. And we were talking about all of the building components. I was doing emergency management SOPs for building components in shutoff valves and stuff. So my small knowledge of that got me my job in floodplain management, and I was so happy there. I stayed for almost 5 years. When I was there, I did multiple deployments. That's something that helped me get my FEMA job. Deployments are awesome, but they can also really suck, especially in floodplain management. You have to be outside for the whole thing mostly. So we did a lot of walking up to structures and taking post-damage photos and doing assessments. And yeah, I mean, it was fun. It really is team building when you're out in 120-degree weather, but you're out in 120-degree weather after a hurricane. So it was a long road, both for Irma and Michael. And I did a virtual thing for Sally. I also, while I was there, the great thing about being young in this industry is that you get the opportunity to challenge norms. And one of the things that I was able to do was create the SCORE CAB program, which basically redid how we do community assistance visits, which is when we go to the community and we used to kind of do like an audit with them, but now it's more like we do an educational training for a whole day. And then after that, we do a really effective shortened meeting. Out of all the almost 5 years I was there, after 2 years, I got promoted to being the program manager. And I can tell you guys a little bit more about that too. I was the hiring manager. So if you have any hiring manager questions, you can definitely ask me that. When I was at the State Floodplain Management Office, I took the opportunity to do a voluntary organization, much like this one, but much larger. I worked with ASFPM. I was nationally elected as their vice chair 2 years in a row. And I did a lot of work with the policy committees. If you guys are ever interested in floodplain management, that is an awesome organization to get with. You can write a paper and get a full scholarship to their conference. So if you love floodplain management, mitigation, anything having to do with erosion and beach nourishment, definitely look into it. It's a great organization and they have a lot of opportunities for students. Okay, and then as I was introduced before, I went back to grad school. And the main reason for this is that undergraduate degrees are usually pretty open, which is awesome because you get to do a lot and experience a lot. I would definitely recommend, if any of you can, to go to grad school. Probably not right away. It's really awesome to have job experience and get money. You really get used to getting paid. But it also helps you become a technical expert in certain fields. After my master's, I didn't have to do a thesis, but I got a bunch of insurance licenses. And that was awesome because now I'm working with FEMA. And I got my state tuition covered working with DEM because I had a full-time management position, and that was awesome. And yeah, when I applied for FEMA, one of the things that they made sure of is that I had a master's degree. I really don't know why, because it has nothing to do with housing. But for a lot of the upper GS levels, they really want you to have that master's. So I had it and I got there. Things that people don't tell you about working for FEMA. You don't go to FEMA right away. I mean, unless maybe you went to like Princeton and you're some sort of prodigy, but 99.9% of people have to start at the state, the local government, for a contractor. And that's totally all right, because it's really hard to get a federal government job. So, you know, count your internships and your state jobs and all that before you think about taking on FEMA. But the thing I do love about working with FEMA is that I'm in a really large team and we all have to co-collaborate on stuff, making original documents, those fact sheets that you've seen online. I'm making some of those fact sheets for housing. And all in all, it's a great chance for growth. I'd love to go into more, like back into floodplain management with FEMA. I would love to go into the insurance industry with FEMA. FEMA has FEMA. The Insurance and Mitigation Directorate, where they just talk about the NFIP and NFIP insurance and claims and all of that. So that definitely interests me going forward, and I have all those opportunities, which is awesome. A couple things about getting a full-time job. Always be willing to take the interview. I have friends to this day who are gainfully employed and they're so afraid to interview because they're so afraid of rejection. Hey, it's just another opportunity. Take that interview. If they don't call back, you're going to find the right fit later, and that's okay. Organization, never lose your head. It doesn't matter what you do, be organized. Being organized, especially when you're leading people and they're like, hey, what's next? What are we doing? What's the plan? Definitely always have that ready to go. Organization is what got me my promotion at DEM to be the program manager, and it really has obviously paid off. Again, with the FEMA stuff, your dream goal or your dream job is a long-term goal. That's okay. I talk to a lot of kids that are graduating college and they're like, I'm just gonna go, like, I don't know, get my 6-figure dream job right out of college. And like, you know, it's great thinking that. And like, I'm only, what, 26? You guys probably don't need to know that, but it's not like it takes long. Just really put in the work and you're going to get there. It's okay. Also, it's a small world, so never be mean to anyone in contracting, local government, state government, and FEMA. It can be really contentious, especially with FEMA state local interactions sometimes, but never be mean to each other, because there's going to be a time where you all look around and check around who was in this room on this day, and you're going to work for an array of contractors and local governments and everybody. And it's really easy to flip that door. 5 years from then, they could work for, contractors when they work for the state, and you who work for FEMA went to contracting. And, like it really is a revolving door. So always be careful of what you say to people. Also, I haven't talked a whole lot about what floodplain management is because I wasn't sure how much you guys wanted me to harp on that. But if you're really interested in floodplain management and you're ready to get a job, please send an email to Christabel Moore at em.myflorida.com. She's the one who took my position when I left. She's awesome. The whole entire team over there is awesome. The only reason I left is because there wasn't enough growth and I really wanted to get up in the ranks one day. So yeah, she's in my position now, and she is ready to hear from some of you. If any of you are willing and interested to become floodplain management specialists, that job was awesome, man. We went out about 50% of the time. You got to be willing to travel, but we were always taking pictures of buildings, palling around, going out for beers and stuff. Like, we were a very close team, and the fact that you had to travel and do field work, take meetings with people, teach classes, it really kind of broke up the monotony of a job, because in a lot of government jobs, you can get burnt out pretty easily, especially doing something like compliance where people kind of are mad at you all the time. All right, so now I'm going to ask for any questions. I don't know what you guys want me to cover, so I really wanted to open this up. Again, I did all the hiring when I was there. Christabel does it now. So if you have any hiring or interview questions, anything about my own experience, how long it took to get into FEMA, any thing like that.
So I have a few questions about like floodplain management, flood insurance, like the topical kind of stuff. But yeah, if anyone wants to ask anything, I'll totally open the floor up before I ask anything. I think I heard someone just now.
Yes, that was myself, Stefan. I want to thank you for hosting this. I've actually been brought by Fabian, because I actually am studying global health at the University of Miami. So I've been interested in focusing more on like the environmental aspects of emergency management because I'm getting my master's there. So I want to thank also Shannon for just speaking about her experiences and what she's gone through as well, because I feel like I have a lot of questions to ask right now, to be honest, but just to open it up, you mentioned something about willing to be traveling. How much is something that we have to cover maybe out of pocket, or is that something that the organizations that we want to be a part of try to subsidize for us?
For the whole thing. So when I was with the state, if we were sent off on business, we'd get a rental car that helped out with liability. You get a very tiny, probably not going to cover your bar tab type stipend each day, and that covers kind of like base food outside of your free hotel breakfast, very likely. They pay for gas. I mean, it's all kind of comes down to accounting, like being able to keep a government credit card, knowing when you run it, keeping all your receipts, and then kind of going through the billing process. So yeah, I mean, that was always covered. When I was with ASFPM, I had to go to Wisconsin once or twice a year for their annual meetings. It was twice before COVID, and then I think I did it one other time, and then COVID happened. So the organization is a voluntary organization. They paid for my flight, and they kind of covered what they could. I didn't really cover anything out of pocket, honestly. So usually when you're a part of professional organizations, it doesn't come out of pocket. I know that I had a friend who was in grad school with me, and he said that he had to pay for his grad school out of pocket, but he got reimbursed. I didn't even have to go through that, as long as I had my paperwork in order when I went to school and I had my management position with the state of Florida. Not all states do that, by the way, but the state of Florida does do that tuition reimbursement thing, but it's not really reimbursement. They just kind of wipe it. And then I paid like $11 a semester or something crazy. So, I mean, I'll say this, the state government, it doesn't pay a lot. It pays decently though, and it has a little bit of room for growth and promotion. And it really helps out if you want that tuition waiver. If you guys apply today to the positions Christabel has, you wouldn't get the tuition waiver, but you could work your way maybe up into a more permanent position where you'd get that. Like, I didn't get it until I worked there for like 2 years.
Makes sense. I have a follow-up question to that. You mentioned something about being resilient. Just because maybe one organization doesn't find what you have to offer interesting doesn't mean that you can't continue trying to knock on doors. Like, what would you say? How would I say this? How important is the mental aspect of that? Like, I feel like we go about our studies and we read the textbooks, but we don't really understand like what it is to actually be persistent and be wanting to go after our goals. So like, what would you say to someone that's going through that? How should they approach that from a mental point of view?
Just be confident and practice your STAR questions. Look it up on the internet. It's what FEMA uses. I think it's what a lot of places use. They're situation type based questions that kind of want to track your mental staging of things. So it's kind of like you get a situation. What did you do in that situation? How did you react? And how was it resolved, essentially? So if you guys kind of practice your STAR questions and get some confidence in yourself. I mean, think of things outside of the box. Like, I mean, I don't want... we get a really big range of people who do interviews, right? So we have some of the professionals, but honestly, a lot of them are kids right out of college. Kids right out of college are really bad at interviewing because they've never done it before. And they also don't have anything to fall back on. Like if I can't think of something in an interview, I'm just going to talk for 5 minutes about my experience until you probably lose me. So I have that. But a lot of the kids out of college, like, especially if they don't have internships, organization experience like this, I mean, this is awesome to do. You get to talk to professionals, you get to be in a group setting, you get to lead meetings and coordination calls and all that. So it's tough for the kids that don't do anything, I want to say, honestly. When you're doing interviews, be confident as hell. You're the best person at this job, best person on earth. Like, just really feel what you're saying and feel yourself, and you're going to come across really well. When it comes to being rejected, if that happens, people have a hard time looking at things as an opportunity, and they think about it too personally. Like they think like, oh, they're rejecting me as a human being. That's not really the case. If you don't have the resume to pack it up, then you don't. Maybe I called you because I found something interesting on your resume and I wanted to talk to you about it. But sometimes we just get better fits. Like honestly, a lot of the times with getting a job, I think depends on who's applying. Like I just got that job with FEMA after 7 months of applying, yes, and that's probably pretty quick. But if I had applied against someone who'd done housing, they probably would have gotten that job over me. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of the luck of the draw for part of it, and it's part of your confidence in answering those questions and believing in yourself.
I appreciate that so much. That makes a lot of sense. I have another follow-up. You mentioned, I feel like, how much of GIS is involved in what you do? And if you can kind of like explain what that is, to maybe the people that don't know what that acronym is, but because as someone that's doing like the graduates now, they really do emphasize like being able to hone in on those math skills and try to make sure that you interpret whatever geographic information comes across you. So how much of that do you have to calculate on a daily basis?
Honestly, you have to have a comfortability with GIS, but not as like a writer, like as a user. And it's really not that hard, especially in this age. All of the people under 30, 40-ish have a pretty good understanding of technology and computers. So it shouldn't, honestly, GIS at the user level shouldn't daunt you too much. When we'd go out in the field, we would have ArcGIS maps on our phones. It was like a downloaded app, and we have a GIS team at DEM. So we would like take the pictures of the buildings or whatever we saw, and then we geotag it on ArcGIS and fill out a little bit of information or notes about it. That was so simple to use. I would never be afraid of doing that. I never did anything where I had to be a GIS user. We have a whole GIS team. If you're interested in that, I would definitely apply with them. But you don't really do too much more GIS than GIS as a user, and it's super simple.
That's very interesting. Okay, that makes sense. One last question, then I'll leave it to whoever wants to ask something else. You mentioned something about being able, like with our age, as someone like yourself, to challenge the norms that you come across. What do you mean by that? Because I've read like firsthand accounts about how FEMA has handled certain situations and certain disasters, and have used them as case studies to learn from them, the mistakes that we did, right? Because it was good that was done, but sometimes we make mistakes and we have to learn from those mistakes. Do you see some sort of repetition of maybe things that aren't being fixed, that you have to challenge that norm, because that they just leave it like to not be tended to as the normality?
Yeah, and I mean, there's a certain amount of breath that you need to know when to make a wave and when not to. It made sense in our case, especially being a state government. Now that I'm in FEMA, I don't really know how many waves I'm going to make, but we'll see about that. But at the state, I created this entire program where we would visit the communities based off of the way that it's recommended nationally. But the way that it was recommended, it definitely seemed like we were grilling the communities instead of supporting them. So I kind of took the base elements of that and I made sure that our scorecard program would meet those elements. And then I was able to kind of redo it. So it was a lot more educational. I got CECs or continuing education credits for all the people that are CFMs that went to my training. The meetings were a lot shorter and everything was a lot friendlier. And FEMA honestly actually loves our model. They think that they want to deploy it nationally now. But before that, nobody had ever challenged the norms of the NFIP. It was a program that was created in 1968. And nobody's ever changed anything really, especially on the regulatory side. So now that they're doing all these changes with the insurance, you'd think that it would happen with the NFIP programs regulatory as well. But it's a tough business. People don't really understand what the NFIP is. They kind of assume that we're all insurance adjusters, and that it makes it difficult a little bit with public perception of what our job was. But all in all, I think that a big part of it is knowing when to make a wave and knowing when something could just be done better.
Thank you so much for answering all my questions.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Totally open floor, free speech forum. Don't be afraid to either put something in the chat or unmute yourself, you turn on your camera or whatever. Wonderful source of information here with our speaker about FEMA, FEMA, floodplain management, national flood insurance, that postgraduate job search, right? This EM specific postgraduate job search. Totally go for it, guys. I have some questions, but I'll open the floor up if anyone wants to chime in.
Stefan, thanks for putting this on.
You're welcome.
Question for you, Shannon.
Yeah.
Floodplain management. I'm getting into that part of my master's program, and I've been watching it a lot on the news. And a place I just lived in Baton Rouge. I'm from UCF actually in Orlando, but I lived in Baton Rouge before this. The county level, since you were at the state in Florida, they're starting to build out basically in swamps now. And say, here's a case study. If I'm an emergency manager in Baton Rouge right now, there's a big suit going on between the county and two developers. They built two developments side by side, and they didn't get any like GIS and FEMA surveys and all that. So when one development fills with water from rain, it floods the development on the east. When the west one floods, it floods the one on the east. Mm-hmm. Okay, it floods back and forth. So now they're suing each other and they're suing the county. Okay, so if I was in a city commission meeting and I said like, yeah, if you build here, you're going to have to do multi-million-dollar modifications or you're just going to flood each other over and over again. I mean, this is a real case scenario going on in Baton Rouge. How do I contextually talk to these people? It's like they're going to build no matter what I say, but how are you supposed to frame the discussion?
Well, normally, so this kind of frames what I did a little bit better. Normally, the people that would have checked the maps and would have done their homework on it and determined the base flood elevation, all that, that's where I would likely step in. I didn't do that at the local level, but like our community assistance visits that Cavo was talking about was kind of where we'd go to the community and check in on them and see if they were doing any sort of violations or things that were illegal. So in that case, very likely they could sue the county because the county was supposed to be following NFIP, building code, ASCE 24 regulations that they seemed to skirted by. And let the developers do that. The developers might have to pay reparations if they were told to do that and they didn't do it. I mean, it might just be a line of people dropping the ball, but what I would probably do is this kind of gets into the complicated part of the NFIP. Likely, I would look at what the area looks like, and I'd ask the community or the developers or both to do compensatory storage. Essentially, it just means that when they're flooding back and forth like that, I would probably say that they need to find a place on the property or somewhere else, somewhere up or downstream, where they would be able to take land out so that there is a wider area for the water to flow. And that way they're not flooding each other out constantly. That's probably what I do. Compensatory storage would probably be the easiest thing in that context. But yeah, why it happened, it's very likely that the community at the base level dropped the ball on the regulations, or the developers didn't listen. Developers never want to listen, so I'm not really surprised by that, but it could have been anything.
Okay. And just for the audience, one of my emergency manager friends in Tampa just emailed me and said he had to pay a contract to remove 9 tons of dead fish in the last couple of days. So that's not any of the education for emergency managers, moving dead fish. So apparently that's a new thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's all in the news now. But he emailed me a couple of days ago, but now it's in the news. And there was literally truckloads of dead fish in Tampa Bay, and he was told by the city council to remove it. It's like, okay, new job for emergency management.
Yeah,
Anything seems like it could be a job for emergency management.
Yeah. But that's all I got. We'll see how it goes, because in the area I live in Florida and Orlando now, we're the same situation. The developers are building in the swamp along the St. Johns River. And this is how close the water level is. They've got new developments, and the ditches going around the houses and the developments are always full of water. And I'm just like, that means they built in a bad place. That's where the water level's at. That's why the water's still in the ditches, no matter how dry it gets. It's just a serious problem here in Orlando because they're running out of buildable land.
Yeah, definitely. I love and hate the NFIP for many reasons, because while it puts a lot of regulations on areas of where you can build, that's literally down to the issue. Like, it's about how you can kind of skirt the rules and build somewhere that's not smart. That's kind of honestly it. The best way to develop in a floodplain is to not. I will always stand by that. Gilbert White, he's the father of floodplain management, and his whole idea to do floodplain management was around saving the environment, not finding a way to build on it. So, I definitely feel you there. And nobody really likes to follow the rules, and that's when we get stuff like this. So, yeah, it's a tangled web we weave.
Yes. Well, if anybody's on here, ESRI is having the worldwide GIS conference. It just started Monday, and I'm on it here simultaneously with y'all watching it. So if anybody has their password to ESRI, their student password, you can get in there, and they're doing the 3-dimensional floodplain stuff. They can show you in real time a housing development flooding. And so that if I ever have to go up against city commissioners, I'll have that 3-dimensional mapping system that shows them in real time. So I don't have to go back then in front of city commissioners and say, I told you so. And I'm going to say, I showed you what was going to happen. So that's my take on it. I'm going to be able to graphically show them that they're making bad decisions.
Yeah, definitely. And that's part of it too, is perception.
That's all I got. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions from the crowd?
Yeah, don't be afraid to chime in. I know some people like, Sam Gelibert and Alex Griffin are usually so curious about so many things. I have some questions, but just, I want to totally, have everyone chime in first.
I was going to ask a question next.
Awesome.
So I just got transitioned onto a new project with CBDGDR doing voluntary home buyout, and specifically for a community that flooded in Michael. And I was just kind of wondering, personally, I'm getting into like the nitty gritty of the funding of these programs and that sort of thing. And when we're in the classroom, it kind of sounds like CBD-GDR especially is a lot bigger than it actually is, and that there's a lot more funds obligated towards it than what the reality is. It seems like a really big chunk of money, but then when you break it down amongst the communities, it gets pretty small. So how do you see kind of programs like that and mitigative programs for homes that are kind of repetitive losses in floodplains? How do you see that kind of transitioning into the future? Do you see that sort of program growing, or kind of the problem that Cam was saying, where like we're kind of running out of land to build on? So how do we then turn the repetitive loss properties into green space permanently? So how do you see kind of those two elements interacting in the future?
I think the BRIC program is going to fix a lot of that. Of course, we haven't seen it done yet, so like fingers crossed it actually does fix a lot of that. But HMGP at points can be really unfair, and I think that that's kind of what BRIC is trying to fix there. That BRIC program has billions, I want to say, for annual allocations. So I would have to comment more when I see it in action about how I feel about it. But on paper, it seems like a great idea. CDBG DR especially, you probably know about that since you've been working with it a little bit, but it's housed with the DEO, and then they have to work with DEM to implement it, and anything that you have cross-agency is going to be a mess. I mean, there's really no better way to put it.
Yeah, I have a city that I'm working for, the commission is like super like want to get this through as quickly as possible. They're worried about hurricane season, and of course DEO is we're a few months behind on that. So there's definitely some frustration with the interagency interactions.
Yeah, at that point, you might want to start looking at alternatives too. Like I know there's the HLMP program. It used to be called something different. The hurricane loss mitigation program at DEM, they could do up to $194,000, and they can do flood mitigation. There's certain programs that can't, and it starts to get wild with the funding. I was never personally a grants manager, but I did talk a lot of people through this when they were either substantially damaged or if they were trying to get rid of a repetitive loss. That one was highly recommended from me because not a lot of states have a state grant program. So you know that it's a very small amount of people that are working just for you for that community. So that was pretty good.
Yeah, we've actually had some pretty good luck so far with HMLP and BRIC also. Everyone's excited about that. But like you said, we don't really know what's actually going to come of it. So
yeah, exactly.
Good things on the horizon, hopefully.
I hope so. I mean, you know, I think they created BRIC out of knowing that there was inefficiencies in the grant process, and a lot of states like Florida who have big disaster declarations were getting a lot of the money. That does make sense, but I think that this is going to be a little bit more equitable for everyone. So we'll see how it plays out.
Would anyone else like to ask anything? Okay, well, Sam Gelliber texted me that he's been having some connection issues. So he might text me a question or two that I can then ask you and let him know, or he can watch the recording or something like that. So yeah, I'll ask first about, so you probably obviously have covered this a bit in the talk, but so floodplain management, you know, 101, would you like to give the rundown 101 on floodplain management for anyone who's not super knowledgeable on it?
It is a complicated program, so I can tell you a little bit about the day-to-day activities that we did, especially if any of you are interested in getting one of the floodplain management specialist jobs at the state. I can tell you it was so much fun. Every day is different, and that's the great thing about it. Mainly our like bottom of the line job is to ensure compliance with all of the local communities. Local communities have to implement the NFIP of their own accord because it's so deeply tied with building stuff, building science, building code regulations. A lot of time it's a building official, a zoning manager, somebody in the building department. Sometimes for the really small cities, it's a city clerk, people who know stuff about permits. So that's usually who the type of people we're working with are. With the score cab program that I made, it was really awesome because we kind of, well, so we used to go to one community at a time, and I feel like people felt singled out and they were kind of afraid of the process. We changed it so that we call a lot of communities in one area. We try to get between like 15 and 25 communities together, and we stick them all in a room, and we do an all-day training basically about floodplain management, what they're supposed to do, what they're agreeing to uphold by being in the NFIP, all that stuff. So my parts of that were usually the post-disaster part because I was one of the only staff that's been out in the field. I was deployed in IRMA in 2017 through 2018. Long haul, man. We did a lot of substantial damage assessments, which is what I was talking about before when we're outside with the clipboards and the teams with FEMA. So yeah, we'll do classes like that. I talked about the insurance obviously as well because I have a master's degree in that. But each of us had a section or two, and we'd kind of, rotating speakers really kind of helped keep the all day training fresh. We would talk to communities there, and throughout the week, we usually set up a doodle poll, and we would go over everything about the community basically. So, what are their permits this year? How are they regulating this? Do they have any issues they need to bring to us for us to escalate up to FEMA, that kind of stuff. Because a lot of the local governments can have some politics that don't really agree with floodplain management or environmental science. So yeah, we'd have one-on-one meetings with each of those communities after we did the training. We'd get to know their programs, about their regulatory actions in the NFIP, and then we would go back up to wherever, to Tallahassee. Some of the staff are from Georgia. We'd all go home, and then we'd get back in the office, and we'd write up reports, basically summarizing everything that they said. So, if I know that the town of whoever is, how they handled their permitting process. If they had anything that kind of raised some eyebrows when I was there, I'd write that in my report. Any sort of compliance on a property. So we went down and we'd take pictures of them first, like of the buildings and stuff. Those would be brought up in the meeting. So we'd show them the pictures and we talk about each one and kind of see if they're dealing with it effectively, if they need a little bit of a push in the right direction. We'd send those reports out. We send out continual letters. So a lot of it was, it's everything from teaching people how to do what we do, having one-on-one meetings, taking good notes, writing good reports. Then at the end of the reports, you send final letters saying whether if the report is closed or not, meaning that they didn't have any issues. So we did, it was a good mix of stuff. It set me up to have a great career, both doing educational and meetings one-on-one, as well as all of that government writing. Government writing is a very important skill to have. Everybody wants you to have it. So that was a really awesome opportunity. I think that kind of covers a lot about like what we did with floodplain management. It gets really deep into the regulatory, so it would take me a zillion to explain all of it. But basically, we just want to make sure that people are following the rules and building smart in the floodplain and building up to code and standards, not trying to skirt the rules or anything like you were talking about earlier with the 2 apartment complexes that got flooded. We try to help those kinds of people find solutions. We were brought issues like that all the time. In post-disaster, we do the substantial damage assessment. So we would look and estimate whether a house was damaged 50% or more of its value. That was also in the floodplain. So, it's really so like the scale for floodplain management is like off the charts. You do so much stuff.
Okay.
There's always something to learn.
Yeah, definitely. Flooding is so common in Florida, obviously, right? Hurricanes and flooding, it's like they're such common hazards for Florida. So EM professionals in Florida should very much be in the know about all the ins and outs of those things, how to prepare, how to respond, recover, all of that. So I appreciate all that information. As far as the National Flood Insurance Program, would you like to give a kind of a one-on-one rundown on that?
Yeah, sure. It was a program that all the regulatory stuff is tied into the NFIP. the NFIP at its base is an insurance program for people who live in special flood hazard areas. There is no, I mean, having an insurance program run by the government's unheard of. That is good and bad for a couple of reasons. Insurance wise, flooding is kind of on the same level with earthquakes. Most of the time when you do it, it's going to be pretty much a total loss, or a big enough loss that they want to avoid it. After Andrew, insurance companies went broke left and right because they couldn't pay the bills of all the people that they were insuring. So it changed insurance greatly, but it also created the National Flood Insurance Program. You know, I mean, a couple floods before that, because nobody wanted to insure them. Like, I mean, having private flood insurance was like unheard of. You can see the market has kind of built up to that today. There was regulations passed not that long ago that kind of allows the private market to enter the space of flood insurance. But I want to say like 90% of it is done by the government. Because it's done by the government, that's why you had jobs like mine that kind of went with the regulatory instead of just the insurance. And obviously the insurance is based off of those flood maps that some of you may or may not have seen before. So I would definitely say that it's a good program. I really believe in it, but there's definitely a lot of disconnects that I hope get bridged over the next couple of years, decades, however long. They're changing the insurance program now, the NFIP. Basically, it goes into a very, are you in or are you out in a mapping area? So even if you lived in the middle of, hopefully, stop me if I get too technical, but if you live in the middle of an A zone, say, which is like the non-wave action flood zone, but you're at the edge of an X zone, which basically means you're not really in a flood zone. Right now, you would just pay the A zone rates based on the mapping information. And whatever their formula is to do the calculation for how much you need to pay, but they're kind of changing it to be more risk-based. So somebody who's at the edge of an A zone is going to hopefully pay less than they probably pay now, but somebody who's in the middle of one or closer to the B zone, which is the flooding with wave action zone, they'd probably pay more than they do now, which is a lot more fair. They didn't really think about the replacement cost of housing. So that's going to change the game for, yeah, I know it's kind of wild. Like you think that that's a basic thing. So I see a lot of changes with the program. I believe in the program. I love the program. But they do still have a ways to go. And I think that they're making good strides with risk rating 2.0.
Yeah, you know, speaking of flood zones, flood hazard maps, things of that nature. I remember former head of FEMA Brock Long once said, he said, I don't care what a map says, anywhere that it rains, it can flood. Would you agree or disagree?
Oh yeah, I mean that's kind of the sing song of everyone in floodplain management. Anywhere it rains, it can flood. So 25 or 26, I think it's like 25.8 or something crazy. % of homes that are in X zones flood on an annual basis. It's very likely that over a life of your, you know, basically if you look at it this way, the life of your 25 or 30-year mortgage, you'd flood at least once, even if you're in an X zone. So I think that when it's phrased like that, it really does open it up to know like, hey, like we're all kind of in trouble, especially with global warming and environmental changes, and mostly because of all these buildings. You know, I feel like I'm waiting for the day that Tallahassee pops off and there's a giant, like a couple giant rivers. There's a big flood zone that runs through here. I mean, you know, I feel like people never think about development and how actual building on new lands works and how it works with impervious surfaces. You know, that rainwater's got to get absorbed or sent somewhere. So it keeps kind of getting sent down the hill. And I feel like because of that, we're seeing a lot of changes. I'll get calls from people who are like, my house is flooding and I've lived here for like 50 years and it's never done that before. And I'm like, well, that's because all the environment around you is changing and not enough calculates for that. You know, the built environment, nobody really considers. What is that? There's smart street, something like that. I think it's a nonprofit that did its own Real Street. That's it, Real Street. They did their own floodplain mapping, kind of considering a lot more than what FEMA considers. And I definitely encourage everybody to check it out. It's not regulatory. It's just kind of like higher standard type map because it incorporates all the annual rainfall and all that stuff. But it's super educational to kind of look at areas that you never really would think would flood and be like, oh, that must be topographically low or something strange. And it kind of puts things in perspective a little bit for you.
Yeah, obviously I don't think, every developer or entrepreneur or just typical person out there generally thinks of, is this surface like safe enough to build a building on, and what are the geological factors to consider. And I think people just think, oh, look, land, I can build something on it, like that, that's it, right? But obviously there's much more complexity than that. I see that Cam has raised his hand.
Yeah, I'm looking at this the ERSI stuff this week, the GIS. I mean, literally in ERSI, you could plug a building in someplace and it's got subsurface, surface, and above surface, everything in 3D, and you can put the physics processes in there also, the soil type, whatever. And you could plug a building in someplace and run water, and you can see what's going to happen. So it's not like it's impossible. You can actually make an animation of it. So I think FEMA needs to start moving toward that type of that concept, to where they plug a new building in someplace and then they watch it on GIS and see what happens. And then they say, okay, you're going to have to do this mitigation, and you're going to have to, whoever the developer is, you're going to have to pay for this mitigation if you plug a building in there, because it's going to cause your surrounding neighborhood to flood.
Yeah, and I mean, things should be accounted for like that. They're really moving the actual insurance part of the NFIP over to that sort of a solution. The regulatory is still kind of following. I think all the regulatory stuff kind of gets complicated because it's built around the base NFIP. So the building code is really kind of the only thing that changes, and that only comes out every 3 years. So we're a little bit behind in some of that, but yeah, they are doing that with the insurance program, though. With the risk rating 2.0, it'll like let you put in any mitigation that you've done to get insurance discounts. So I think that's hopefully going to have people, when there's money involved, people always want to save money. So hopefully that'll push them to build a little bit smarter and do a little bit better.
Yeah, one of the last year ERSI had the conference, there's companies, the insurance companies are actually using artificial intelligence now. So if you want to build a building in a risky area, they plug everything in and it'll risk base it and tell you how much it's going to cost according to the artificial intelligence. And that's not just like 5 or 10 factors. They're looking at like 1,000 different variables, including the building code and how you actually built the building, everything. And some people are freaking out because their assessment of what it's going to cost insurance the building is 3 or 4 times what they thought it would be, because of the artificial intelligence can make those determinations that a human can't make.
Yeah, and they've incorporated the AI with risk rating 2.0. Good news for those people that think it's outlandish with the insurance. It's going to cost less and scale over time. So basically, those policies are all kind of grandfathered in. It is statutorily in statute, there we go, in statute, that it can only raise about 18% a year. That's where it's capped. More likely, it's going to be between like 11 and 15. So they have some time to kind of get it together and get used to the rates, or sell the house if they don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what inspired you to pursue a master's in risk management and insurance instead of a master's, public administration, like a lot of EM people seem to pursue, or even like, a master's degree specifically in emergency management? Because I know there are some online programs out there for that. What inspired specifically RMI?
I'm going to say this because I know none of the professors are online, but me and a bunch of my friends who were pretty successful in this industry really recommend that you get a different master's than you do an undergrad. I mean, it shows great variability. It shows that you're looking to get a specialty. Like I got mine in risk management and insurance because I love the NFIP and I want to make a career out of it. You know, I want to be the next Rachel Sears who runs the NFIP program. I want to be the next Tony Hake who's doing the risk rating 2.0. And I really feel like those things are in my grasp now that I have this master's degree. My other friends, I think they've done a range of things, but you know, economics is always very popular. Anything with data science, do something that includes data science. I feel like on every application I fill out these days, they want me to be proficient in R and Stata, SQL, all these things. So I think it just never hurts to be variable because it shows that you have a really wide range of education and skills. The thing I love about the master's degree, I would definitely recommend everyone take some time, you know, work and find your passion, because if you told me 5 years ago that I was going to school for risk management and insurance, I probably would have laughed.
Okay. Thank you for that advice. Yeah. So I should have included this in my intro about your bio, kind of slipped my mind, but you served in the past as a president of the FSU chapter of the International Association of Emergency Managers. So back when you were president, which that was, I'm assuming, what would that have been? Probably 4 or 5 years ago, give or take?
I think so, maybe a little bit longer. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, like 5 years ago, I want to say.
Okay, so back then, did the chapter have frequent speaker events? What did you all do as a chapter when you were president?
We'd had a lot of speaker events and it was really cool. We'd get the little camera guy in, and actually they were pretty well attended. Usually it was people from DEM. Sometimes we'd have out of town guests with FEMA. I know Alex Amparo came one time. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to talk to him. Oh, he's really cool. He's like my boss's 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 boss, probably his boss.
Okay.
He's really high up in FEMA. He has been for a number of years. It was always great talking to him. So, I mean, we had a number of people of varying backgrounds. I think the one thing that I would say too is like a lot of the speakers, a lot of them were in more like actual emergency management, like action roles. Floodplain management has like a very mild amount to do with emergency management. It's not super emergency management involved, which kind of sounds silly. But like, unless it's gray skies, usually like you're kind of doing your own thing. I took an internship, my first internship doing COOP. I definitely felt restricted by that. I didn't think that it had enough like work for me, and I didn't really want to check a checklist all day. And that's kind of what being in plans was. It was a little bit more action oriented. So I'm glad that I kind of branched out and like found my own way and found my own people to talk to. But I know that it's like still kind of times of COVID. Outside of the speaker series, going to conferences was awesome because you could talk to contractors, you could talk to everyone. I talked to my future boss there, and that's when he gave me an interview. So your IAEM conferences are going to be really important. All these events are going to be super important. You'd be surprised who actually remembers your name after a number of years, you know, with your speaker series or your conferences. I mean, it lends yourself to opportunities. Yeah, and two, when you're talking to people in the field, especially at these conferences, be cool. I had a lot of people who would always just be like overexcited, and I'm like, chill, they won't want to hire you if you seem like a nerd.
Yeah, I'm curious, how far did you all travel for the conferences?
We did a couple in DC. I was invited to one in Chicago, so I went there. With ASFPM, I've been trying to get the school to get people into mitigation and floodplain management left and right. I mean, I loved my job. Obviously, I stayed there for 5 years, which is a very unmillennial thing to do. But I seriously love floodplain management. So that was the school conferences. With the ASFPM conferences, I mean, I've been a number of places. I think that I went to Phoenix, Arizona. There was one in Kansas. There's been a couple in Georgia and Seattle, and I mean, all these places. So we were supposed to have it in Dallas last year, but that got canceled, obviously, and North Carolina this year, and that got canceled, unfortunately, but it's going to be in Florida next year. So, I mean, especially it's going to be in Florida, definitely get your essays together and submit something for that conference, because you guys could drive right over to Orlando and be there. But yeah, especially floodplain management is a really good place because nobody really knows that it exists. And it sounds lame. Like I understand it sounds lame, but it's like really cool. It's like the best job ever. And students aren't really super involved at conferences. They don't really ever show that much interest. I have people, obviously in different cities, otherwise I'd tell you guys about it, but they're like begging for interns left and right. They want to hire someone. I mean, I want to hire somebody with the state of Florida. I don't even work there, and I hope one of you applies. So there's a lot of job opportunities, and it lends to a lot of different things. You know, like one day I started out in regulatory, I got a master's degree, and hopefully I'm going to do insurance one day. I mean, it really like opens you up to pop around. But with an emergency management background, that's basically what helped me, that and my experience out in the field is what helped me land my job at FEMA. So that's why I'm saying like, just be everyone's everything or everything that you want. Because doing emergency management undergrad and then doing the graduate school with insurance, I think opens a lot of doors.
Okay, yeah. If you want to send me info about that upcoming conference in Florida, I'll definitely encourage the incoming officers to, try to put together a trip for that and get the general body in the loop about that and everything. I know I asked you how far you all traveled for conferences because I know the upcoming IAEM conference in October is going to be in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I'm encouraging the incoming officers of the FSU chapter for this upcoming school year. I'm encouraging them to try to get SGA funding and try to get a group to go out to that and whatnot. So yeah, definitely the conferences and the networking is very important, very valuable. A lot of the speakers, that we've had for this chapter this past year, I met them through FEPA. I'm sure you're familiar with FEPA. Yeah, so conferences and networking very valuable. Well, yeah, I was just curious at what you all did as a chapter back then because I heard from, I forgot which I don't know, it was either Alana Vinson or it might have been. I'm trying to remember one of the other past presidents I communicated with, but I forget who was specifically, but one of them said that the chapter in the past helped out with like exercises with FDEM, which.
Yeah, we did the makeup and helped do a couple of the coordination things for volunteers. Rob was like really at the helm of that. So you'd have to ask him a little bit more if you guys want to get re-involved. I bet it was off because of COVID, but they're probably going to want volunteers and help right when things start getting ramped up again.
Yeah, I'll definitely encourage the new officers to look into that because that'd be great if the chapter could do both speaker events, for obviously the sake of learning and networking, and then also to help out with exercises and get some like volunteer experience. Obviously, that's great for people's resumes and strengthening connections with like FDEM and whatever other entities, agencies that it could be possible with. Because when I got involved with this chapter back in what was it? It was over. It was a while ago. So it was the spring of 2020. It was right before this virus lockdown stuff started. I found out about this chapter through Dr. Janet Dilling's Fundamentals of EM class because she mentioned the chapter in her intro video, like this pre-recorded intro video in the class, right? That you watch like the first week of the class. And then I asked her about the chapter because I wanted to get involved. She told me it had gone defunct. I think it just got gone defunct for a year or two. And then she got me in touch with Bobby Duggleby, who used to be the faculty advisor. And I had already had student organization experience from I was like vice president of the economics club back in like 2017 through 2018. I was president of like a Christian pro-Israel student organization for a few years, stuff like that. So, I told them, hey, I'll help revive it, right? I have experience with this stuff. And I just honestly, it was kind of a blank slate. And I took like the model from economics club, for example, like what they do is they just do biweekly meetings with different economics professors at FSU speaking on different economic topics. I just took that kind of model and just applied it to the IAEM chapter. Hey, let's just have, different types of EM speakers on a biweekly model, in fall and spring biweekly, summer is a little more sporadic. So, and I figure, hey, it makes for great networking. We have had students who like Fabian here and also, no, Adriana's not here, but Fabian and also another student, Adriana, they got internships with Ashbrit Environmental, through we had Brittany Perkins Castillo come and speak to our chapter, So I think the speakers, they make for obviously great networking and career development opportunities. So yeah, but that's a good idea though, to get back into exercises as a chapter besides just doing speakers. So hopefully that's a great approach that the new officers I hope they'll pursue that. And I have probably another question or two, but would anyone else like to ask anything about anything? I don't want to take up too much of the floor right now.
I saw there's something in a chat. I missed the whole chat box until I started writing in it. As a hiring manager, what do I look for in candidates that are young and right out of undergrad? I look for internship experience for one. I want to know that you tried, you basically like went through a process, had a boss, had coworkers, figured out kind of the jive of getting, into the real working world, and that you did great and you created a product. And, you get a lot out of internships. You don't get paid for the most part, but like doesn't mean that there's no opportunity. Most of the time you have a usable product that they get to keep with them, and you have an awesome resume after that, and you can actually talk about times that you had with your coworkers, who were the fellow interns, any of the stuff that you completed. Hopefully you maybe got to do some government writing or your own project while you were there. I mean, there's just like a lot to build off of. I personally don't take it as seriously when people are just like, I don't know, I was in a sorority. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's all they did, and this is their first job that they're ever going to have outside of waitressing. I mean, like, all those things I did too, but like, I want you to have more, because that's going to give you the upper hand at getting a job.
Yeah, it's very important, for soon to be college graduates to have experience besides just a minimum wage job, and just positions in student organizations, let's say. I mean, that's great stuff to start out with for sure, but internships in more complex fields, more complex firms, agencies, etc., are very important. People should definitely be interning for those sorts of things, a handful of semesters before they graduate, ideally. Definitely. I have another question or two, but would anyone else like to ask anything, especially if anyone needs to go? Now's your chance, don't be shy. Okay, well, I will ask, I usually like asking this to, many of our speakers. Would you say that, would you say that you've had a really impactful experience from a particular disaster, like one that was really, memorable, really shaped a lot of your, EM career development? Anything really notable?
Yeah, I think that would be Irma for me. I was gone for 4 months after Irma. I did a lot of really hard, dirty, sweaty work on that one. It was really eye-opening. I feel like people think that emergency management is like all about deployments, and for some people it really is. But after that deployment, I realized that I was really not cut out for that. But that doesn't mean I wasn't cut out for the industry. You know what I mean? It was really tough. I learned a lot of lessons. You had to really get along with the people that you were with, because it was 120-degree weather and everybody was grouchy. After disasters, nobody's really nice. Nobody ever really tells you that. It's not like this like cute bonding experience. Like everyone's really pissed. Things don't work out for you, for FEMA, for the local government, for anyone. Half the time it's like finger pointing. Like, I'd go to a meeting and the local government would be like, ask FEMA, and FEMA would be like, ask the state. And I was the only representative for the state. And it was something that I didn't do for a living. Like they'd ask me about grants. That's how I learned all about the grants and grant cycles, because people were asking me when they didn't have homes and they had no belongings out in the field. So it's tough. I mean, you have to talk like face to face with people who've lost everything. Again, everybody's mad. That's a hard environment to be around, especially for like 4 months in a row. I think that people think that the deployment is everything. And while deployments really do help you like boost your resume, it's not like they're like the load of fun that I think a lot of people chop them up to be.
Yeah, I think some people just like getting outside and getting fresh air and doing more hands-on things as opposed to like the desk job, Monday through Friday. So maybe it's looking for that sort of experience.
Yeah, the field work was tough. I think a lot of people like when we're activated, because they get to go to the EOC and kind of like feel like they're doing something, and they are doing something for sure. But like you don't really get that face-to-face like in the zone disaster stuff unless you have a job doing that. And I had a job doing that, and it was rough. Like I feel like people always talk about it, and make it sound like it's the most amazing thing ever, but it's rough, man.
Right. Oh yeah, yeah. It's there's a whole world of difference between a textbook and actually, in that moment, in that hectic, adrenaline-filled moment of the disaster happening, of people's lives on the line. Which, us being students, like, who haven't graduating on out into that yet, we haven't really been through that experience yet. We haven't been exposed to that quite yet. So yeah, I'm sure it's very, like, very much, kind of changes you to an extent, very, very impactful on you. Well, I'm trying to think. I think I basically asked, what I'd like to ask. Would anyone else like to ask anything while you have the chance before we close out? Don't be shy. Okay, cool.
Oh wait,
Alex?
sorry. One more. Just having some tech issues. So going with kind of what you had to say about the deployment, I think, like, I know Stefan and I both have experience actually in the workplace, but kind of transitioning from going to college to a full-time job, like you were talking about earlier, you have to really kind of like mitigate some of your expectations for it. And as far as keeping a work-life balance, and especially when you're on a deployment or maybe you're relocated or that sort of thing, what is kind of your recommendation as a student coming out of college recently? How do you kind of find that for yourself?
It's tough. I mean, especially when you traveled as much as I did for the state, it would kind of, sometimes the lines get blurred. You hang out with your coworkers and all that, and that's really fun. It's a little bit different for the disasters and the deployments. I mean, I think thankfully was not in grad school when I did my major deployment for Irma, and I think I may have just started when I did Michael. No, I hadn't even started yet then. It's really hard to do all of it. I think that it's important to know that no matter where you're going to work, you're a part of a team. People are there to help you. A lot of times I would unload my work on somebody else if I just had too much to do and felt weighed down by the expectations. And yeah, even if you're on the road, it's okay to tell people that you don't want to go out for a night or whatever. The disasters got a little bit harder. It's mentally taxing, especially considering how upset everyone is. And a lot of that anger is directed towards you, whether you're a contractor, like most of you guys that are contractors are going to be contractors are going to work with the state, local, or federal government. So oftentimes they'll just kind of put you along and you'll be a part of the state or be a part of FEMA. And that gets really tough when, there's a hurricane that ripped through and they're like, hey, it's all your fault. I'm like, yeah, I made the hurricane. But it's like hard not to say like weird, like mean replies to that to people. Or like, I talked to somebody who lost everything and has a great attitude. And then I talked to somebody who got the contents of their garage washed out and they're pissed at me because they don't have a lawnmower. And I'm like, it's tough. It's tough dealing with the public. Any sort of public facing job kind of sucks and it's kind of rewarding at the same time. And you really kind of got to find the balance and get the right attitude towards it.
Okay, well, would you like to give us any other parting, thoughts, perspectives, advice when it comes to, the EM career world, just the general postgraduate, career world, FEMA, FDEM, any of that, any closing monologue?
Just again, be nice to everyone. You don't know who's going to end up where, and this is a very, very, very small world and a small business. On that, DEM was a great place to start out. It was an awesome opportunity to work with the local governments, with the federal government. You're never going to get a job right out at FEMA, almost never, unless you like invented something. So it's a great place to start. Working for contractors, working at the state. I just want to tell people not to be afraid of that. Like, you didn't fail just because you didn't get your dream job out of college. And you didn't fail if you don't get a job. Like, people, you get rejection left and right. I got rejection for 7 or 8 months applying to FEMA, and I have a banging resume. So, it happens to everyone, and it's just kind of a part of the life. Pick yourself up by the bootstraps and move on some occasions. You just got to figure out when to do that. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I got to say.
Okay. Yeah, definitely important to be persistent, not let a rejection get anyone down, and to keep trying, keep putting yourself out there. yeah, just it's competitive, but don't let the competitive nature of the career world, kill your confidence. I guess that's one way to put it. So, well, thank you so much, Shannon, for spending some time with us this evening. Thank you so much for helping to lead the chapter in your presidency, but when you did, and helping to carry that torch forward to ultimately where it is today. It's really cool to hear from a former president of the chapter, and thank you so much for all the career insight and everything. So, thank you. A round of applause.
Yay, thanks so much for having me, guys. And don't forget about the ASFPM Student Paper Scholarship and the job at the state with the State Floodplain Management Office. If anyone's interested in that, I put my friend's email in the chat, christabel.moore@em.myflorida.com. The job is not posted. I just texted her and asked her if, like, on the low, she would be willing to answer any applications or inquiries from you guys, and she said she would. So just pass it along internally, and I hope to see some of you either at ASFPM or working in the State Floodplain Management Office soon.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, if you want to just also send all that info to me, like over LinkedIn or something, I'll make sure it gets to our people. I'll definitely, really encourage them to have a group at the conference upcoming in Florida. Do you know when that is specifically?
Usually it's in like May every year. I'd have to look that up specifically, but there's a lot of time. I mean, they've already started making the agenda, I think. It's like an all-year process for them. It's a really big conference. There's a lot of great opportunities there that absolutely nobody ever takes advantage of.
Okay, so we're looking at May of 2022.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, we'll make sure to have a group there, and thank you once again. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was great talking to you guys, and I wish you the best of luck in your career paths.
Yes, thank you, Shannon.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Shannon.